Well, earlier today, it emerged that the police harassed a man in Uxbridge after he recited verses of the Bible.
So there is a public
we need to have
protection
structure,
order
otherwise
that
you're speaking at the same
from
time.
the council.
Well, right now you're speaking over her.
Right. So I'm saying, is she speaking or are you speaking?
Yes, you do.
We both speaking.
There is an element of
But I'm
freedom
not
We can
speaking
walk
when
away.
she's
We can walk away. Let's let the
religious
people
act.
change.
However, you still
But as long as you're not preaching over
So,
the,
that's what I'm
over the
saying to you.
megaphone.
Obviously, a crime has been committed. We need to investigate.
Okay.
Or do you want a £100 fine?
Okay.
Because if you don't want that, we could deal with it in custody.
I'm not trying to be rude. I just want to ask one question.
I think you are, sir, trying to be rude.
I want to answer the
And I think by the look on
question.
your
Thank
face,
you.
we think it's
Thank you,
justified.
officer. Can I ask you the question? I'm not asking you the question. I'm asking you.
Well,
Okay.
okay, but you're aware that I can fine you for
No, but
that. And
I'm
if you
asking
don't
the
want to deal with it,
question.
and I
One
want
second,
you to
one
verify
second,
who you are.
one second.
If you do not, I will
One
arrest
second.
you for public
One
space
second,
protection
one
order
second.
breach.
So what were 4 police doing when you can't find a police to go and deal with shoplifting attacks? We revealed yesterday that 40% of violent shoplifting attacks go unattended by the police, and yet suddenly there are 4 of them to make a nuisance of themselves to what seemed to be a perfectly polite street breacher. And there's now a new report from the think tank Onward, which has suggested that a 1% increase in council tax would put more bobbies on the beat. Now, more money always seems to be the answer to every public sector problem. The NHS, the Ministry of Defence and the police all want more of your cash. But until they spend their current resources well, do they deserve it? With me now is one of the authors of Onward's report, Adam Hawksbee. Adam, thank you very much for coming in. This is my main question, that you can always say, spend more money and then we'll have more police or more doctors and so on. But if we're not getting productivity from the ones we've already got, is that the right thing to be doing?
So I think it's really important to say that the police at the moment aren't necessarily focused on the things that the public prioritises. You saw the clip there. When you ask members of the public what they want police to be doing, there are 3 things they say: tackling antisocial behaviour, dealing with drug offences, and dealing with theft and burglary, some of the shoplifting offences you described. And the problem at the moment is that we don't have enough officers in neighbourhood teams dealing with those problems. Now, you're absolutely right. Reallocating officers to those teams is going to be an important thing to do, getting more money out of our investment, and also using more technology. We don't use anywhere near the amount of digital technology, either in the NHS or Ministry of Defence or in the police.
And I read your report, which has lots of sensible suggestions for making community policing better.
Yeah.
But what it didn't say is, what are the police currently doing? Because you have this chart on the decline in the charging rates of various theft offences, which we may be able to put up on the screen. That's just gone down and down over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
We know they're absolutely useless at investigating or doing anything about online fraud, which has been going up and up.
Yes.
What are they spending their time doing?
So the majority of police officers have gone to 2 areas. One of them is in response, so that's responding to 999 calls.
But they don't respond, because if, if you're a shoplifter,
so response rates.
Response.
Well, actually, in the last few years, response rates across the board have gone up. They've improved after the 20,000 officers were recruited by a Conservative government. But what you haven't seen is an increase in response rates for some of those frontline offences. Shoplifting is one. Antisocial behaviour up by 1/5 in the last 10 years.
So what are they responding to? Street preachers? Because there were 4 of them there. That's the other thing. You get these enormous overreactions. We had a lady on who was silently praying near an abortion clinic, and a whole van load of police turned out. Well, she wasn't some sort of 20-stone thug. She was a gentle lady. She didn't need that number of police turning up.
So the majority of police officers have been reassigned either to those response teams or to specialist teams. And actually, where we've seen police officers assigned to things like drug trafficking or serious organised crime, those things have seen reductions. The problem is that those reductions in very serious kind of violent or organised offences haven't translated to the public feeling safer. And the Home Secretary's talked about this quite a lot.
And that's quite interesting, because if crime is going down, which the figures seem to show it is, then you should actually need fewer police rather than more police.
You should, absolutely. And what you should be able to do is deploy those police officers locally, so they build relationships with people. We all know that where there's a regular police officer, whether they're a full officer or PCSO, who understand the area, they see antisocial behaviour, they might know the school they came from, they know their parents, and they can solve it.
And you had some very interesting figures in Wales about the decline in street crime where they had PCSOs on the beat.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the evidence around PCSOs is really clear. What the public want, and they do want things like tougher sentencing, and they want faster 999 response rates, but the number one thing they want is more visible police on the streets. And 10 years ago, 1 in 4 people said they'd seen a patrol in the last week. Now that figure's 1 in 10. So that's why we think you need that additional injection of funds to get more officers.
But why do you need the extra money? Surely it's the redeployment that you need, because, as you say, crime is going down.
Yeah.
Are the police still too much tied behind their desks? Is the failure to use technology a major part of this, failure to improve productivity?
Yeah.
And it's not as if they're charging lots of people, because the charge rates have been going down.
Sure. So it's a both and. So you can absolutely have those improvements in productivity, and you should. There's an organisation called Blue Light Commercial whose specific job is to find these efficiencies, make sure that every force isn't buying light bulbs from the same place. So that stuff absolutely needs to happen. But the challenge is that numbers of police and police community support officers, PCSOs, are down about half in the last 10 years. And so the problem is that we stripped a lot of these inefficiencies out during the early 2010s as part of the move to austerity. Some of that was good. It meant the force is more efficient. We've now got to correct slightly because we're not seeing enough neighbourhood officers on the front line.
But the formal police, the Police Federation, don't like the PCSOs very much, do they? Because they think their bob is on the cheap. But you're saying we should have some bobbies on the cheap.
I think there are mixed views among officers, and Baroness Casey did a review 10, 15 years ago, and she found that where PCSOs are used well, she described these junior enforcer roles or these bridge builder roles, the sort of relationships I described to you, then they're really welcomed. The problem is when PCSOs are used in inappropriate ways in some of those specialist teams or to respond to 999 calls.
And the sort of final issue is that there does seem to be a decline in public confidence in the police. I think you've got that in your report.
Yeah.
Is that the time to be giving them more money? Don't they have to regain trust first, and then, having regained trust and reallocated resources, come back and say, well, actually, we need more money, rather than getting more money in first?
Yeah, I hear that. And there have been some big national incidents that have meant that the confidence in police is really knocked. But the important thing, Conservative government introduced police and crime commissioners as locally responsible and locally elected individuals. Now, when we're talking about council tax and preset rates, it's them that make the decision, and it's them that should be accountable. So whether they're a Conservative or Labour PCC, if they go to their electorate and say, I want more officers on the street and you can hold me to account for how that money is spent, I think that's the right way to do it, instead of Westminster telling them what to do.
Except in the PCC elections in May, people will vote on national issues.
I don't think that's actually true. So in the West Midlands, you saw Andy Street get elected as a Conservative
Andy Street
mayor.
is an exception.
You've got a Labour PCC and a Conservative mayor. There are lots of examples of people splitting their ballots on PCC elections or council elections. And I think we've got to give the electorate credit that they can see who they want to vote for when it comes to policing and who they might want to vote for on other issues.